Hello, sixth grade scientists. We're going to start the next section of our ecosystem study with talking about how energy and matter flow in those ecosystems, how energy and matter move through an ecosystem. So, the images here on this first slide are just some examples of some different aquatic ecosystems. Remember, we talked about that in our last session. So, remember, aquatic ecosystems are those where most of the environment is in water. So it doesn't mean that there's not land. So you can see in this one, let me use the pointer so you can see. So in this one, there is some land as well, but most of the ecosystem is on or in water, next to water. Okay. Um, so all living things. And remember, we've talked about the different types of living things: plants, bacteria, animals, protists, fungi. All of those living things have to have energy in order to survive, but they get that energy in different ways. So, we're going to begin by talking about plants. And so, with plants, their energy that they get, their food energy, all begins with sunlight. So, sunlight is light energy, it is not food energy or chemical energy. And so, plants and some other organisms, I'll mention those in a little bit, some other organisms have to use sunlight, the light energy from the sun, in order to make their food energy. Okay. And those types of organisms are called producers because they're producing their own food. They're producing their own food energy. Sometimes we also use the word autotroph when we're talking about producers, but it's the same thing. So if you hear me say producer or you hear me say autotroph, I'm talking about the same thing. These are organisms that can make their own food energy. All right, and so producers is actually a pretty big group. So plants are definitely all included as producers. But there are some other types of living things that are also producers. One of them is algae. Algae is a type of protist. So, algae, right here where you're looking at millions and millions and millions and millions of protist organisms, algae organisms, because algae are microscopic organisms. That means that you can't see them without the aid of a microscope. And so, but algae are a type of protist that can produce their own food just like a plant. Now, if you look over here, the cyanobacteria, this is a type of bacteria. These are also microscopic. This was an image that was taken looking through a microscope. And so they are very, very tiny. And then kelp is a type of water plant, a type of seaweed, and kelp is also a producer. So all of these organisms are examples of producers. They make their own food energy. All right, so let's break down the process. The process that these producers, let me go back. So these producers use a process called photosynthesis to make their own food energy. And if we break down the word photosynthesis, it helps us to understand the process a little bit better. Anytime you see the word root photo, it means light. So photograph, okay, has to do with light. When you see the word synthesis, this word means putting together parts or different components or different elements to form a whole. Okay, so they're using like the puzzle pieces put together to make one picture as an example of synthesis. So it is the putting together of different parts or elements to form a whole, excuse me, using light. All right, now if you notice from the previous slide, what do all these things have in common that is visible? And that is that they're green, right? So that green color actually comes from a substance called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a chemical It's actually a protein that's produced in the cells of these producers, and it is a pigment. So a pigment is anything that has color. The color of your skin is determined by how much melanin you have. Melanin is a pigment that gives your skin color. There's also a pigment that gives you eye color and hair color. Chlorophyll is just another type of pigment, and it is green in color. Now, chlorophyll is amazing. It has an amazing capability. It can trap sunlight. And so when producers have chlorophyll, that chlorophyll can trap the sun's light energy to use to make photosynthesis happen. So that is why photo, which means light, is part of the word for photosynthesis, the process, because the chlorophyll in producers traps that light energy and uses it to make photosynthesis happen. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about the photosynthesis puzzle pieces. So we know that light is required for the energy piece, and the green pigment, the chlorophyll that's in the leaves of plants, traps that light energy to use to make photosynthesis happen. Okay, but photosynthesis is a chemical reaction. And when you have a chemical reaction, remember, like with chemical weathering, you start out with one substance and it goes through some kind of chemical change and becomes a different substance. You don't lose the matter, you don't lose the stuff that's there, but it gets changed in some way. Whereas when we have water or any other substance that changes phases, like from liquid to solid, the liquid water is the same substance as the solid water. So that is not a chemical change, that's a physical change. But photosynthesis, there is a chemical change that is happening. So what has to be there to start with is, first of all, light. Remember, that provides the energy, but it's not a substance. Chlorophyll is a substance, but it is not really part of the photosynthesis reaction. It is just there because that's what traps that light coming in. Now, these next two, these are really important puzzle pieces in photosynthesis. A producer must have carbon dioxide, and it must have water in order to do photosynthesis. Okay, so carbon dioxide and water inside the leaf, they will react together in the process of photosynthesis, and then they produce carbohydrates, which are sugars, and oxygen. And the carbohydrate that is produced in photosynthesis is called glucose. So this is what we start with. These are the substances we start with, carbon dioxide and water. And these are the substances that are produced after the photosynthesis reaction happens. So glucose and oxygen. Okay, so these are the products of photosynthesis, glucose and oxygen. And here's the chemical formula for glucose and oxygen so you can see it. All right, so that's the end of this video section all about producers and photosynthesis. Please make sure that you answer all of the questions at the end of the video and that you also make notes in your science notebook as you've been watching the Ed Puzzle. Thank you.